The cold metal floor sent shivers through Commander Elias Vance's boots as he stood alone in the center of the massive arena. And he could feel 10,000 alien eyes watching him from the circular seats that rose high into the darkness above. He was the only human in a room full of monsters and gods, the only representative of Earth in a galaxy that had already decided his species was worthless. And yet he stood with his back straight and his eyes forward because that was all he had left to give the tribunal arena, stretched wider than any stadium on Earth. Its walls made of some black metal that seemed to drink the light, and floating orbs of pale blue energy provided the only illumination in this place, where civilizations came to prove their worth or die trying high. Arbiter Velkith sat upon a throne of twisted bone and crystal at the highest point of the arena, his insectoid body covered in natural armor that gleamed like polished obsidian, and his arms ended not in hands, but in curved blades that could cut through starship hulls. 12 elder species made up the Galactic Conclave, beings who had ruled the stars for longer than humans had existed. And they looked down at Elias with expressions ranging from boredom to disgust to something that might have been pity. The human speaks for its world, Velkith announced, his voice echoing through the arena like thunder rolling across mountains. And his blade arms clicked together in what passed for amusement among his kind. Let it be known that Earth has petitioned for recognition as a sovereign species under Conclave law. Whispers rippled through the assembled aliens, and Elias caught fragments of their conversations, even through the universal translator. Embedded in his skull, fragile creatures, hissed a serpentine being with scales that shifted colors like oil on water. They live such short lives, rumbled a massive creature made of living stone. What could they possibly contribute? No psionics, clicked an insectoid smaller than Velkith but no less deadly in appearance. No natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities of any kind. Elias let them talk because he had expected this. And humanity had prepared him for exactly this kind of reception during the 3 years it took to reach this moment. Earth had made first contact with the Conclave just 15 years ago. And in that short time, humans had learned a terrible truth about the galaxy they lived in. Species without worth were harvested, their populations scattered across the Dominion as workers and servants, their homeworld stripped of resources, their cultures erased and forgotten within a generation. And humanity was next on the list unless Elias could prove they deserved to exist. You may speak. Human, Velkith commanded, and the arena fell silent. Elias stepped forward, his boots clicking against the metal floor, and he looked up at the ancient beings who held his planet's fate in their claws and tentacles and appendages. He had no names for, "My name is Elias Vance," he said, and his voice carried clearly through the arena thanks to the acoustic engineering of this place. "I come from Earth, a small blue world on the edge of the Orion Arm. And I am here to prove that humanity deserves a place among the stars." Laughter erupted from several sections of the arena, a harsh sound that mixed clicks and growls and frequencies that hurt his ears. "Every primitive species says the same thing," Velkith responded. And there was no cruelty in his voice because cruelty required caring. And he simply did not care. "The trial of worth will determine the truth of your words, not your speeches." Elias nodded because he had known this was coming. And he had trained for 2 years, specifically to face whatever tests the Conclave would throw at him. "I accept the trial of worth," he declared. And somewhere in the audience, a pale ethereal being with silver eyes leaned forward with sudden interest. The first test was intellect. And Elias found himself standing before a massive holographic puzzle that shifted and changed even as he studied it, requiring him to find patterns in chaos and order in randomness. He solved it in 47 minutes, beating the minimum requirement by just 3 minutes. And the Conclave responded with polite silence. The second test was endurance. and Elias was placed in a chamber where the temperature dropped to levels that would kill most Earth creatures in minutes, and then rose to levels that would cook flesh from bone. He survived by controlling his breathing and focusing his mind, techniques that human monks had developed thousands of years ago. And when he emerged from the chamber with frostbite on his fingers and burns on his shoulders, the conclave simply noted that he had passed. Unremarkable, Velkith declared after the second test. And the word cut deeper than any blade could have. Elias wanted to scream at them, wanted to tell them about everything humanity had achieved, about the wars they had survived and the diseases they had conquered and the impossible dreams they had turned into reality. But he remained silent because words would not save Earth. Today, there is one test remaining, Velkith announced, and something in his tone made Elias' blood run cold. The trial of the blade. The arena grew quiet in a way it had not been before, and Elias noticed that several aliens were looking away from him now, their expressions suggesting something like shame or regret. In this trial, Velkith continued, a blade will be thrown at you, and you must stop it using only yourself, with no technology and no weapons permitted. Elias felt his heart pounding against his ribs as understanding dawned. Psionic species catch it with their minds, Velkith explained. Armored species let it strike their natural defenses, and species with neither ability typically die, though we consider such deaths honorable. The pale being with silver eyes was watching Elias intently now, and he thought he saw something like curiosity in those strange features. The trial of the blade has ended every petition from non-psionic species for 10,000 years, Velkith said, and his blade arms clicked together again. Do you accept this final test, human? Elias looked up at the ancient arbiter, at the alien who fully expected to watch him die, and he smiled. I accept. The arena erupted in murmurs of confusion, because no condemned creature had ever smiled before the trial of the blade. And even Velkith paused for a moment before signaling for the blade to be brought. Fourth Elias stood alone in the center of the arena, watching as attendants wheeled in a launching mechanism, and atop it sat a dagger forged from metal so dark it seemed to be made of frozen shadow. Tomorrow, he would either save his world or die trying. And as he looked up at the stars, visible through the transparent ceiling of the arena, he made a silent promise to the 8 billion souls waiting for him back on Earth. He would not fail them. The dagger sat on its launching mechanism like a sleeping predator, and Elias could not take his eyes off it as the arena prepared for what everyone believed would be his death. It was called the Arbiter's Fang, forged from neutron star alloy in the heart of a dying sun, and it had killed more petitioners than any other weapon in Conclave history. The blade was impossibly thin, barely visible when viewed from the side, and its edge was sharp enough to split atoms, making it one of the deadliest objects ever created by any civilization in the galaxy. This blade has been used in the trial for 12,000 years, Velkith announced from his throne of bone and crystal, and his compound eyes reflected the pale blue light of the arena. It has ended the petitions of the Norvik, the Silenthi, the Brahmok, and 417 other species who lacked the ability to stop it. Elias listened to the names of the dead civilizations and wondered how many billions of lives had been lost because their representatives had failed this impossible test. He wondered if anyone would remember humanity's name after today. The blade will be launched at maximum velocity, Velkith continued, and the petitioner must stop it using only their natural abilities, with no technology or external assistance of any kind. A holographic display appeared in the air above the launching mechanism, showing the speed the blade would reach and the distance it would travel before striking its target. Elias did the math in his head and realized he would have less than half a second to react. Less than half a second to do something that no human had ever done before. On the arena, the 12 elder species watched with varying degrees of interest. and most of them had already lost focus because the outcome seemed so certain. The massive stone creature had closed its crystal eyes in what might have been meditation or sleep. The serpentine being with shifting scales was having a quiet conversation with its neighbor, not even bothering to watch the condemned human. Only the pale being with silver eyes seemed truly focused on Elias, and her gaze carried a weight that he could not understand, as if she saw something in him that even he did not know existed. "You may speak final words," Velkith said, and his voice held a formality that suggested this offer was merely tradition, a courtesy extended to the dead before they died. Elias looked around the arena at all the beings who had already written him off, who saw him as nothing more than another primitive creature about to meet its end. And something shifted inside his chest. It was not fear, though fear was certainly present, crawling through his veins like ice water. It was not anger, though anger burned in his heart at the casual cruelty of these ancient species who played with lives like children played with toys. It was something else, something that had been sleeping in his blood since the day he was born, something that every human carried without knowing it existed. "I do not plan on dying today," Elias said, and his voice rang through the arena like a bell. The serpentine being stopped its conversation and turned to look at him. The stone creature opened its crystal eyes. Velkith's blade arms stopped clicking together, and for the first time since the trial began, the High Arbiter seemed genuinely surprised. "All petitioners say they wish to live," Velkith responded slowly. "But wishing does not stop blades." Elias smiled again, that strange smile that did not belong on the face of a condemned man, and he shook his head. "I did not say I wish to live, High Arbiter," he replied, and his voice carried a confidence that seemed impossible given his situation. "I said I do not plan on dying. And there is a difference between hoping for something and knowing it will happen." Murmurs rippled through the arena as aliens leaned forward in their seats, suddenly interested in this strange human who faced death with such unusual calm. The pale being with silver eyes rose from her seat and moved closer to the railing, her translucent form catching the blue light in ways that made her seem almost ghostly. "Activate the launcher," Velkith commanded, and his voice betrayed a hint of curiosity that had not been there before. The mechanism hummed to life, magnetic fields building to levels that made Elias's teeth ache, and the dagger began to glow faintly as energy poured into its housing. This was the moment that would decide everything. In 3 seconds, the blade would launch. In 3.5 seconds, it would reach his heart, and in 4 seconds, humanity would either have a future or become another forgotten name on the list of failed species. Elias did not run, and he did not close his eyes, and he did not beg for mercy from creatures who had never learned what mercy meant. Instead, he reached deep inside himself, past the fear and the doubt and the voice that screamed at him to flee, and he touched something that had been waiting there all along. It felt like fire and lightning and starlight all at once. A power that had no name in any human language. A force that burned in his blood and sang in his bones. He did not understand what it was, but he knew with absolute certainty that it was real, and more importantly, he knew that it was strong enough. "Launch." Velkith commanded. The mechanism screamed as magnetic fields collapsed, and the blade shot forward at speeds that made it invisible to the naked eye. 12,000 years of conclave history said that non-psionic species could not survive this trial. 417 civilizations had died proving that rule true, but Elias Vance was human, and humans had spent their entire existence doing things that were supposed to be impossible. He reached out his hand toward the oncoming blade, fingers spread wide, and he did not try to catch it because catching it would be impossible. Instead, he did something far stranger. He told it to stop, not with his voice, and not with his mind the way psionic species did, but with something deeper, something more fundamental. something that came from a part of him that had been locked away since before his species learned to walk upright. The blade was 1 meter away, then half a meter, then 1 centimeter, and then it stopped the arbiter's fang hung in the air exactly 1 millimeter from Elias's outstretched fingers, frozen in place as if the laws of physics had simply stopped applying to it. Blood dripped from Elias's nose, and his entire body shook with effort. But his eyes remained locked on the blade that should have killed him. The blade that now obeyed him in defiance of everything the galaxy believed possible. The arena had gone completely silent. 12 elder species stared down at the impossible scene before them. And for the first time in 10,000 years, they did not know what to say. Vlek rose from his throne, his blade arms hanging loose at his sides, and his compound eyes reflected the image of a human doing something that could not be done. How? The High Arbiter whispered, and his voice cracked like old stony lies, looked up at the ancient being who had expected to watch him die. And despite the blood running down his face and the pain burning through every nerve in his body, he smiled. Humans do not have psionics, he said through gritted teeth. We have something else. And we just never had a reason to unlock it before. He pulled his hand back and the dagger clattered to the floor. No longer frozen, but now merely a piece of metal that had failed to kill the human it was meant to destroy. Pale being with silver eyes was smiling now too. And there was something knowing in her expression. Something ancient and patient and filled with secrets. The galaxy would never be the same. The arena exploded into chaos the moment the dagger hit the floor, and Elias stood in the center of the storm with blood still dripping from his nose and his hands shaking from whatever he had just done. Aliens were screaming in languages the translator could not handle. Sounds of fury and disbelief, and something that might have been terror mixing together into a wall of noise that pressed against Elias from all sides. Velkith shouted commands from his throne. But nobody was listening anymore, because the impossible had just happened, and nobody knew what it meant. The massive stone creature had risen to its full height and was demanding answers in a voice that shook the floor beneath Elias's feet. The serpentine being was coiled around its seat and hissing words that sounded like accusations. Every member of the conclave was reacting in their own way, and none of them knew how to process what they had just witnessed. Elias wanted to collapse, wanted to close his eyes and let the exhaustion take him. But he forced himself to remain standing, because showing weakness now could undo everything he had just accomplished. Order, Velkith bellowed, and this time his voice carried enough force to silence even the most outraged aliens. There will be order in this arena. The noise faded to angry murmurs, and thousands of alien eyes turned back to look at the human who had broken 12,000 years of history with nothing but his outstretched hand. What trickery is this? Demanded the stone creature, its crystal eyes blazing with inner fire. No species without psionics has ever passed the trial of the blade, and humans have no psionic abilities. So this must be some form of deception. I use no technology, Elias responded, and his voice was hoarse from the effort of speaking. I use no weapons and no external assistance of any kind. So I have violated none of the trial's rules. But you did something, the serpentine being hissed, its scales shifting to angry red. Something that should not be possible. And the conclave demands an explanation. Elias opened his mouth to respond, though he honestly had no idea what he would say, because he did not understand what he had done any better than they did. But before he could speak, a new voice cut through the arena, clear and musical and ancient beyond measure. I believe I can provide that explanation, said the pale being with silver eyes. And she descended from her seat like a ghost drifting down a mountainside. The other conclave members fell silent as she approached, And Elias noticed that even Velkith seemed to treat her with a kind of wary respect that he had not shown anyone else. Ambassador Syra of the Velith, Velkith acknowledged, and his blade arms clicked in what might have been a formal greeting. You have insight into this situation? I have more than insight, Syra replied. And she stopped a few meters from Elias and studied him with those strange silver eyes. I have been waiting for this day for a very long time, and I had almost given up hope that it would ever come. Elias looked at the alien woman and felt something stir in his chest. A recognition that made no sense because he had never met her before today. What are you talking about? He asked, and his voice came out stronger than he expected. Syra smiled, and it was a sad smile filled with memories of ages past. Tell me, Commander Vance, she said, what do you know about the architects? The word sent a ripple of reaction through the arena, and Elias noticed that several of the elder species had suddenly become very still. They are a myth, the stone creature rumbled, but its voice carried a note of uncertainty that had not been there before. A legend from before the conclave was formed. Stories told to children about godlike beings who created the foundations of our civilization. The psionic network that every gifted species uses, the serpentine being added, is said to have been built by the architects. But no proof of their existence has ever been found. Syra nodded slowly, and her silver eyes never left Elias's face. The architects were not a myth, she said. They were real. And they did build the psionic network that connects every gifted mind in the galaxy. But they did something else as well, something that my people have kept secret for millions of years. The arena had gone completely quiet now, and even the most skeptical aliens were listening with intense focus before the architects destroyed themselves in a war that burned out 100 star systems. Syra continued. They created a backup. A way to preserve their knowledge and their power in case their civilization ever needed to be reborn. She turned to face the conclave, her translucent form catching the blue light of the arena. They seeded a planet on the edge of the galaxy with their genetic code, she said. They created a species that carried their power dormant in every cell, sleeping until it was needed, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Elias felt his heart stop as understanding crashed over him like a wave. Earth, he whispered. Syra turned back to him and nodded. Earth, she confirmed. And humanity, the children of the architects. Born without knowing their true heritage, living for millennia without any idea of the power sleeping inside them. The stone creature rose to its full height again. But this time, there was fear in its crystal eyes instead of anger. You are saying that humans are not a primitive species, it said. You are saying they are the descendants of the beings who created the foundation of all psionic life in the galaxy. I am saying exactly that, Syra replied. What Commander Vance did today was not psionics as you understand it, because psionics is merely accessing the network the architects built. But what humans can do is something far more fundamental. She looked at Elias with something like pride. Humans do not use the network, she said. They can rewrite it, because the source code runs in their blood. And when Commander Vance told that blade to stop, he was not asking the universe for permission. Elias remembered the feeling that had surged through him when he reached out his hand. That sense of touching something ancient and powerful that responded to his will. He was giving it a command, Syra finished. And the universe had no choice but to obey. The silence that followed her words was the deepest silence Elias had ever experienced. And he could feel the fear spreading through the arena like a diseased wall of elder species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Were now looking at him not as a primitive to be harvested, but as something far more dangerous, a threat to everything they had built, a power they could not control, and worst of all, a species of 8 billion souls who all carried the same potential sleeping inside them. Waiting to be awakened, Elias understood in that moment that passing the trial might have saved humanity from being harvested. But it had also painted a target on their backs that would never fade. The galaxy had just learned to fear humanity. And fear could be even more dangerous than contempt. He looked up at Velketh and saw the calculation in the High Arbiter's compound eyes, the rapid assessment of threats and possibilities, and he knew that the real fight for humanity's survival was only just beginning. The chaos that followed Syra's revelation was unlike anything Elias had witnessed before, and he watched as 12 ancient civilizations turned on each other with centuries of barely hidden tensions exploding into the open. "The humans must be destroyed," screamed the serpentine being, its scales now a violent crimson that pulsed with barely contained fury, "before they awaken fully and become a threat to every species in the galaxy. You speak of destroying billions of innocent lives," rumbled the stone creature. And to Elias's surprise, there was something like sympathy in its crystal eyes. "Lives that have done nothing wrong except exist. They are weapons waiting to be activated," hissed the serpentine being. "And only a fool leaves a weapon in the hands of an enemy." Velketh slammed his blade arms against the armrests of his throne, and the sound rang through the arena like a gunshot. "Enough," he commanded. "This is the conclave of the 12, not a gathering of frightened children, and we will discuss this matter with the dignity our positions demand." The arguing aliens fell silent, though the tension in the arena remained thick enough to cut. Elias stood alone in the center of it all, still bleeding from whatever he had done to stop the blade. And he felt like a mouse that had wandered into a den of wolves, only to discover that the wolves were now fighting over whether to eat him or run away. Syra moved to stand beside him, and her presence provided a small comfort in the midst of all the hostile attention. "The Veleth have protected this secret for millions of years," she said, addressing the conclave. "We could have revealed it at any time, but we chose to wait because we believed humanity deserved the chance to awaken naturally. And now they are awakening," Velketh said, and his compound eyes studied Elias with an intensity that made him want to look away. "The question is what the conclave intends to do about it. The answer is obvious," the serpentine being insisted. "We strike now, before they become too powerful to stop. And we eliminate the threat before it can grow." "And if we fail?" asked a small insectoid creature that had remained silent until now, its voice clicking with each word. "If we attack and they survive, we will have made enemies of the most dangerous species to exist since the architects themselves. We will not fail," the serpentine being replied. "They are still weak, still sleeping, and this human only managed to stop a single blade, which is hardly the power of gods." Elias felt anger rise in his chest. "Hot and bright and dangerous. You speak of my people as if we are nothing," he said, and his voice cut through the argument like a knife. "As if 8 billion lives mean nothing compared to your fear." The serpentine being turned to face him, and its eyes burned with hatred. "Your people are a threat," it hissed, "and threats must be eliminated. My people have done nothing to threaten anyone," Elias shot back. "We came here seeking recognition and peace, not war. And you would destroy us simply because we have potential you cannot control." "He's correct," Velketh said, and his words silenced the serpentine being more effectively than any shouted command. "Humanity has broken none of our laws and threatened none of our peoples. So to destroy them now would be to act on fear alone. Fear is wisdom when the threat is real," the serpentine being protested, "and paranoia when it is not," Velketh replied. "I have sat on this throne for 3,000 years, and I have seen species rise and fall, empires crumble and new ones take their place. And I have learned that the greatest mistakes are always born from acting too quickly." He rose from his throne and descended the steps toward Elias, his blade arms folded behind his back in what might have been a gesture of peace. I watched you face the trial of the blade, Velkith said. Stopping a few meters from Elias, I expected you to die with whatever dignity your species possesses. But instead, you showed me something I have not seen in 10,000 years. What was that? Elias asked. Potential, Velkith replied. True, genuine potential, the kind that changes the shape of galaxies. And I must decide whether that potential makes you a threat to be destroyed or an ally to be cultivated. He turned to face the conclave, and his voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of authority. I declare humanity a protected ascendant species, he announced. They will be given 100 years to develop their abilities under conclave observation, and during that time no action may be taken against them by any member species. The Serpentine being erupted in fury, screaming protests in a language so ancient the translator could not process it, but Velkith ignored the outburst and continued, speaking, if at the end of 100 years, humanity has proven themselves capable of peaceful coexistence with the galactic community, they will be granted full membership in the conclave. But if they prove themselves to be a threat, then and only then will we discuss more permanent solutions. You are making a mistake, the Serpentine being warned, its scales shifting to a deep purple that suggested barely controlled rage. And when they grow strong enough to challenge us, you will remember this day and regret your mercy. Perhaps, Velkith acknowledged. But I would rather regret showing mercy than regret showing cruelty, because mercy can be corrected while cruelty cannot be undone. He turned back to Elias and extended one blade arm in what might have been a handshake, if he had possessed hands. Return to your world. Commander Vance, he said, tell your people what has happened here, and tell them that the galaxy is watching, because what humanity chooses to become will determine whether my decision today was wisdom or folly. Elias looked at the blade arm extended toward him, and understood that this was not friendship or trust being offered. It was a chance. Nothing more and nothing less. He reached out and touched the blade with his palm, feeling the cold metal against his skin. And he met Velketh's compound eyes without flinching. Humanity will not waste this opportunity, he promised. And when the 100 years are over, you will not regret your decision. Velkith made a sound that might have been laughter. We shall see. Human, he said. We shall see. Syrah moved to stand beside Elias as the conclave began to disperse. Aliens filing out of the arena with expressions ranging from anger to curiosity to fear. You have done something remarkable today, she said quietly. But the hard part is only beginning, because now you must go home and help your species understand what they truly are. Elias nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility settling onto his shoulders like a physical burden. 8 billion people were waiting for him back on Earth. 8 billion souls who had no idea that their entire understanding of reality was about to change. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had stopped a blade with nothing but willpower, and he wondered how many other humans could do what he had done. He wondered how many of them would be afraid of their own power, and he wondered if humanity would rise to meet this challenge or crumble beneath its weight. There was only one way to find out. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks, and Elias spent most of that time alone in his cabin, staring at his hands and wondering if what he had done in the arena had been a miracle or a curse. He could still feel it, that power sleeping inside him, waiting to be called upon again. And part of him wanted to reach for it, while another part was terrified of what might happen if he did. Syrah had given him files before he left, ancient records that the Velith had kept hidden for millions of years. Documents that explained everything humanity needed to know about their true heritage. He read them over and over, trying to understand how his species had gone from cave dwellers to starfarers without ever realizing that they carried the blood of gods in their veins. The architects had been the first intelligent species in the galaxy, born when the universe was still young and empty, and they had spent billions of years building a civilization that spanned 1,000,000 star systems. They had created the psionic network as a gift to the species that would come after them, a way for lesser minds to touch the fundamental forces of reality without being destroyed by them. But the architects themselves had needed no such crutch, because they could manipulate reality directly, rewriting the laws of physics as easily as humans might rewrite lines of code. And when they realized their civilization was dying, consumed by a war that could not be stopped, they had chosen to preserve their legacy in the most permanent way possible. They had created humanity. Elias's ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel on the edge of the solar system, and he stared at the blue marble of Earth through his viewport and felt tears running down his cheeks. Home had never looked so beautiful or so fragile. The United Nations had been warned of his return, and by the time his ship touched down in Geneva, every major news network on the planet was broadcasting live. He stepped off the landing ramp into a wall of flashing cameras and shouted questions. And he raised his hands for silence. "I have news," he said, and his voice carried across the gathered crowd through speakers that had been set up for this moment. "News that will change everything you thought you knew about who we are and what we can become." The press conference lasted 6 hours, and by the end of it, the entire world was in shock. Scientists demanded proof, and Elias gave them Syra's files. Religious leaders claimed blasphemy and then fell silent when he demonstrated his power by making a glass of water float into the air. Politicians argued about what this meant for international relations, while their own citizens took to the streets in confusion and wonder and fear. But the most important thing happened quietly, in homes and hospitals and schools around the world, as ordinary people began to feel something stirring inside them. In Lagos, a young girl named Amara was playing in the street when a car ran a red light and came speeding toward her, and she raised her hands without thinking, and the car simply stopped, frozen in midair, while the driver screamed in confusion. In Tokyo, an old man named Hiroshi had been dying of cancer for months, but on the day of Elias's announcement, he woke up feeling stronger than he had in years. And when the doctors ran their tests, they found that his tumors had simply vanished in Buenos Aires. A grandmother named Isabella had spent her life praying for miracles that never came. But that night, she laid her hands on her sick grandchild and felt warmth flow from her fingertips. And when morning came, the child was laughing and playing as if she had never been ill. Reports flooded in from every corner of the planet, stories of impossible things happening to ordinary people, and Elias realized that his demonstration in the arena had done more than just save humanity from harvesting. It had sent a signal, a wake-up call that echoed through the blood of every human being on Earth, telling the sleeping power inside them that it was time to awaken. The world governments called an emergency session of the United Nations, and Elias stood before the assembled leaders of humanity with the weight of the future pressing down on his shoulders. For our entire history, we have looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone, he said, and his voice carried through the great hall without need of amplification. We wondered if we mattered, if our existence had any meaning in a universe so vast and cold. He paused and looked out at the faces of presidents and prime ministers, kings and queens, all of them waiting to hear what he would say next. "Today I can tell you the truth," he continued. "We are not alone, and we never have been, because the universe itself was shaped by our ancestors, and their power runs through our veins like fire waiting to be unleashed." He raised his hands, and the lights in the great hall dimmed as power flowed from his fingertips. Not destructive power, but something gentler, something that touched every person in the room and showed them a glimpse of what they could become. For a moment they all felt it. That connection to something greater than themselves, that sense of infinite potential waiting to be realized. "We spent so long feeling small," Elias said, "feeling weak and afraid and alone in the dark, but we were never small, and we were never weak. because the ones who built this galaxy chose us to carry their legacy. He lowered his hands, and the lights returned to normal. But the expressions on the faces of the world leaders had changed forever. "The galaxy is watching us now," he said, "waiting to see what we will become, whether we will rise to meet this challenge or fall into chaos and destruction. And I believe we will rise, because that is what humans have always done." He looked directly into the cameras that were broadcasting. His words to every corner of the planet: "We will make mistakes." He admitted, "We will stumble and fall, and sometimes we will fail, but we will keep getting up, keep pushing forward, keep reaching for the stars, because that is who we are and who we have always been." Far away, on the flagship of the Galactic Conclave, Velkith watched the broadcast with his compound eyes and felt something he had not experienced in 3,000 years: uncertainty. The Serpentine being had warned him that showing mercy to humanity would be a mistake, and perhaps that warning would prove correct. But as he watched Elias Vance speak to his people about hope and potential and the power that slept in their blood, Velkith felt something else as well. Fear, not fear of what humanity might do if they became enemies of the Conclave, but fear of what they might accomplish if they remained friends. Because a species that could rewrite reality was not just a potential threat, they were potential rivals for control of the galaxy itself. And as the broadcast ended and the screen went dark, Velkith realized that the universe had just become a far more interesting place for the first time in 10,000 years. The elder species of the galaxy were no longer the most powerful beings in existence, and somewhere on a small blue world at the edge of the Orion Arm, 8 billion humans were beginning to remember who they truly were.